Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar put on by the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. For those of you who are not part of the usual crowd of viewers, the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace is the oldest independent think tank in the US, founded in 1910 by Andrew Carnegie. And now we have more than 150 experts across 20 countries, providing all sorts of very interesting and exciting independent analysis aimed at governments, private sector, civil society, and all sorts of fun things. So I'm Kenji Kushida, Senior Fellow at the Asia Program, and I'm directing all Japan-related research and programming from our new center in California, which, it'll have an official rollout soon, Carnegie, California. And it's smack dab in the middle of Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley has weathered many storms, and I'm not just talking about Silicon Valley Bank, actual storms. It's been raining at record rates, trees have fallen down, things like that, but Silicon Valley is strong and well. We had some surprises. There's some infrastructure problems, both in the pipelines for literal electricity and other sort of infrastructure like the bank. But other than that, things are going strong. And so it's a very exciting place to be and to understand a different dimension into our topic of today, U.S. Japan collaboration. And so today we have a special lineup. We have the great honor of having Ambassador John Roos. I have a 15-page resume for him of just the basic points of what he's done so far, but I'll just put that into a paragraph a little later. But he's the founding partner of Geodesic Capital, and it's one of the key venture capital firms bridging Japan and Silicon Valley. From 2009 to 2013, he served as the U.S. ambassador to Japan, and he was really right there and really solidly there for Japan during the 2011 Tohoku Great Disaster recovery efforts, the emergency and recovery after. So he has the eternal gratitude of basically everybody in Japan. And in 2022, he was awarded the Grand Cordon of the Order of the Rising Sun, which is the highest honor to be given to foreign nationals, which is a funny way they frame it, but basically non-Japanese people by the Japanese government. So welcome. And we also have Ms. Kaori Fukunaga. She's a senior director in the Next Gen Partners and Incubation at NTT Data Corporation. She's currently based in the Bay Area, and she's been involved in startup exploration, technology validation, and partnerships with next generation startups to expand the digital business. And the idea here is that NTT Data, NTT Nippon Telephone and Telegraph originally was a former state-owned national monopoly telecom carrier, but after several rounds of privatization and reorganization, it's surprisingly global and continues to be more innovative than a lot of people would give it credit for. So this is what they're doing in Silicon Valley will be the kind of take. So I have a few framing remarks, and then we'll go with the conversation with Ambassador Roos and then to Fukunaga-san. And before I start, a few slides. Basically, the main point is that US and Japan have agreed on technology cooperation and collaboration and innovation in summits, periodic meetings by political and government top officials, in the foreign policy, the economy, ministerial meetings, things like that. And of course, geopolitically, the US and Japan are very, very close now, especially given US-China competition. And so, but then a lot of efforts to strengthen the US-Japan technology and innovation collaboration, they suffer from a lack of understanding of how such collaborations are actually happening on the ground. And here is where a lot of the frontier is. So this session provides a high-level overview and then very specific views from the frontier, if you will. So hopping over to the slides here. There. Okay, so accelerating US-Japan tech innovation. And a quick 1-minute advertisement into Carnegie's new Japan initiatives. The theme is Innovative Japan, Global Japan. If you look at places that there isn't much change, you can find plenty of it. But if you also look at places where there is a lot of change and lots of interesting and important things happening, you can also find that. And so Japan is a big economy. It's roughly 2.5 times the size of Canada's GDP, roughly 1.8 times the size of the UK, 1.2 times the size of Germany. And so it's a big economy. You can find different things in different places. So we're trying to put a focus on some areas that have been hitherto under-examined. I have a Startup Japan series looking at its rapidly maturing startup ecosystem, and I have a Japan Silicon Valley Innovation Initiative at Carnegie, which links directly a lot of big Japanese corporations with different parts of Silicon Valley that have policy input, because I firmly believe that you really don't understand what some of the big issues are if you're not right there at the frontier working with them. So big picture, of course, technology and innovation collaboration is now a core pillar of the U.S.-Japan relationship. But what do the collaborations actually look like? High-level policy discussions are wonderful, but they often lack knowledge of details. We need new framing for what these collaborations look like. Much of it happens in the private sector. Silicon Valley is a key location where the collaborations occur. And I will be working from Carnegie, California, on putting out several things related to how the Silicon Valley ecosystem works, because at a certain point, people talk about Silicon Valley, but they have a set of ideas that may or may not reflect the full reality. Linking high-level policy debates with real activities at the frontier. So a big picture reframing, Japan moved historically from a competitor to Silicon Valley to a collaborator. 1980, Japanese companies were competitors. Semiconductors, electronic components, computers, software, they were a big threat. 1990s onward, Silicon Valley moved to higher value-added areas. This is when the ecosystem really, after the semiconductor sort of Cold War era semiconductor industry driven rapid growth to the 1980s, that was the recession in the US. Then 1990s onwards, Silicon Valley emerged as a key economic driver for innovation and economic growth of the US. And then it disrupted much of the world, right? Modularized computer industry, design rather than the manufacture of semiconductors, right? Because Silicon Valley used to have lots of factories all over the place, but then they moved to higher value. Platforms, so the most of the value in PCs, when the PC industry was booming, went to Windows and Intel. So platforms, software, strength from the startup ecosystem, and then the advent of the internet as the interconnection with commercial entities was allowed in the mid-1990s. There was a big boom, and of course there was a tech bust, but the big startups, the successful ones that did not go away with the bust became the tech giants. So from the 2010s onward, it really was an era of both startup ecosystem, but at the same time, big tech giants with the advent of global cloud computing, global scale platforms, smartphones that disrupted a large number of industries, and AI, and others, of course. And from the early to mid-10s, in 2010s, in this context, this was when there was a vast increase in the Japanese presence in Silicon Valley. Previously, there had been some waves, right, as competitors and others trying to figure out how to get value from the rise of the internet in the late 1990s, but really from the early to mid-2010s onward, there was a resurgence of a different kind of collaboration efforts from Japan. And here's a small sampling of the Japanese companies that are in Silicon Valley now. Basically every sector, all types of companies, right? We have in the upper left finance, the big mega banks and also regional banks, insurance firms, and other parts, trading in the lower left, trading firms, automobile firms and the automotive suppliers, and a lot of these used to be to do their traditional business and have sales outlets here, but now it's very much about harnessing the ecosystem. On the right, technology, IT, and components firms, and then construction and these other areas. And even the Japanese the post office, Japan Post even has a presence. And so it really goes through all sorts of different sectors here. So here are the major types of Japanese corporate presence in Silicon Valley. Investing into Silicon Valley venture capital firms. So of course, the way venture capital works is you have venture capital firms that are organized in various ways, but they get big funding from large entities, and then they invest into startups. So large Japanese corporations are increasingly providing investment funding into Silicon Valley-based venture capital funds. Many of these are old established Silicon Valley venture capital funds, but there are also lots of newer venture capital firms based in Silicon Valley, but also with a presence in Tokyo that specialize in getting a lot of investments, and they're called limited partner investments from large companies. So investing into VC funds. Other companies create their own what are called corporate venture capital funds, where instead of having an independent VC firm and you invest in it, the company makes a subsidiary or some kind of entity that's to different degrees of independence to provide venture capital functions themselves. And they themselves, the big company itself, is the primary investor. So rather than taking a large number of external investors, usually either just that one company or mainly that company and then a few others would be the investors, and they invest into startups here. And so direct collaborations with startups. And we have examples of these throughout. And I'm also putting together a series of case studies that are very interesting collaborations between large Japanese companies and Silicon Valley firms. And a previous session that I did at Carnegie, which is also recorded, goes into some examples, and there will be more where these are often additive. They're bringing what big Japanese companies are good at, and then bringing together what Silicon Valley startups are good at that Japanese large global companies may not be so good at, and they work together to rapidly take the offering global, the collaboration. So there are direct collaborations. Lots of these companies have created innovation offices in Silicon Valley, ranging from very small outposts that start with just one or two or a handful of people, have grown, and there are different phases of this. They often start in an accelerator. There are several different accelerators in Silicon Valley that have office space for large Japanese companies and other large companies to have desks there where they can meet with startups, and startups then come and pitch things to them, and the big companies do reverse pitches where they tell the startups what their needs are and what the opportunities are. And so they often start there. Often they then expand into their own office. And this kind of whole ecosystem did not exist to this degree about 10 years plus ago. This has really expanded lately. So it used to be much harder, where Japanese companies coming to Silicon Valley, they would have to just borrow office space and start to make their own networks from zero. There weren't venture capital funds that were specialized and very good at working with Japanese big corporations to help innovative efforts within Japanese corporations, as well as make investments. These didn't exist. Corporate venture capital funds, it was difficult to attract people who knew venture capital in Silicon Valley, because if you got people who did not have experience in venture capital trying to run corporate venture capital funds, it's a different skill set. They may not know the right people, things like this that were problems that have now moved beyond those. So there's been a large amount of evolution of this. And then partnerships with universities and other organizations such as us and other organizations like the Silicon Valley Japan platform, that's part of the U.S. Japan Council, and some other things I used to run at Stanford, and various other partnerships, so researchers going in. So these are kind of the typology of the types of corporate presences. There are other interesting things happening that don't fit this, but these are some of the major forms. So some examples of venture capital firms with Japanese limited partners, Japanese big company investors, right? We have Geodesic, Ambassador Roos, World Innovation Labs, Sozo Ventures, DNX Ventures, NSB Wolf Capital, and others. And some of the bigger funds, the venture capital firms, have raised more than $1 billion of funding each in multiple funds. And so this is a sizable amount. Silicon Valley itself is huge, of course. Within that, Japanese capitalism that big, but it's quite big because we're talking multiple billions of dollars of Japanese large corporate funding that goes into the Silicon Valley startup ecosystem. And it's not just for financial returns. They're often looking for good partners in various ways. Corporate venture capital, these are some companies. And of course, in the previous slide of venture capital companies, there are many more. So sorry if I didn't mention yours. Corporate venture capital, there are many more Japanese companies with corporate venture capital arms in Silicon Valley. This is just as many icons I could fit in here. So some that have been around for a long time, like Presidio Ventures, which is part of Sumitomo Corporation, the trading company, Conductive Ventures, which is actually Panasonic funded, but Panasonic decided not to put their name on it. And so it makes it more part of the ecosystem by hiring some people who were part of Silicon Valley ecosystem. They were at big VC firms and they decided to create this new fund. TDK, Asahi Kasei, these are materials companies that are looking into a lot of deep tech, chemistry-related things. Toyota, of course, automated driving and others, and insurance firms like MS&AD. Many other sectors have corporate venture capital arms. Some interesting and exciting direct investments and mergers, acquisitions. For example, Hitachi, Japan's large conglomerate, purchased Global Logic, which was a very big enterprise-level software and solutions firm for, this is $9.6 billion or so, is what it was, what the press said the amount was. So these are big purchases. And Global Logic was already extremely globalized. It had a big workforce in India, a big workforce in Ukraine. Of course, they've dispersed and continued with that. And in an interesting way, it allowed Hitachi to suddenly get in this domain a big global footprint, but it also allowed Hitachi to enter the Japanese market using the expertise from Global Logic to do things that it otherwise couldn't. Others, like a big construction firm, Obayashi, it partnered with Safe AI, a Silicon Valley-based startup, to do completely autonomous dump truck hauling. And of course, there's a labor cost issue. These are also not fun or good jobs. And of course, in Japan, there aren't enough people. And so with that kind of technological trajectory shaped by Japan's demographic trajectory, then if something like this is used in the Japanese market, then it's an automatic springboard into global markets, where in many cases, in previous generations of information technology, sort of optimizing for the Japanese market would automatically lead companies away from global markets because the industries were too different, the markets were too different. But this is an area where by solving deep problems within Japan, it actually could be a good springboard into global markets. And other sectors, for example, in agriculture, Kubota, that makes tractors and other agriculture investments, they're investing in U.S. ag tech startups. There aren't enough farmers in Japan. The average age of full-time farm workers in Japan is something like 69 years old, very aging population. But it's not just to take this technology and bring it to Japan, it's to solve problems elsewhere. The Californian Central Valley has some severe labor issues of income. The work itself needs to be transformed for people to get higher standards of living. And so by partnering with this existing large Japanese company, the startups can also commercialize and deploy their offerings much faster than they would otherwise. In places like finance, MUFG, they invested in a Silicon Valley company called Ripcord that uses AI to optimize a lot of the paperwork and business processes. And so it's not just fintech, it's other areas of business processes. And of course, these big Japanese financial institutions have a large number of customers, their main banks. And the partnerships go much deeper than, for example, Silicon Valley Bank that had depositors from Silicon Valley startups and VCs. These are the Japanese main banks provide a lot of expertise and deep knowledge that they go back and forth with. And so by buying this kind of, or investing in this type of partnership, they're able to offer services to accelerate the digital transformation of a large number of their customers that have deep relations. So we sort of see how the traditional Japanese system can actually accelerate some aspects of digital transformation that Japan has been a little slow to embrace. So Japan's insurer Sompo, right, invested $500 million in the data analytics firm Palantir a few years ago. And Palantir is one of the Silicon Valley big firms that works with the government and elsewhere for data analytics. And Japanese big firm was right there in the investment process. So those are some examples where the takeaways are that a lot of the U.S. Japan collaborations are taking place in the private sector. The current technological paradigm is actually suited for large Japanese corporations in Silicon Valley, where a lot of big global presence of manufacturing and other areas that Japanese firms have are a direct way and a fast way for Silicon Valley companies to use as a platform to go global quickly and to deploy in the real world fast. And this wasn't the case a few years ago, where the smartphones, for example, were more about disrupting existing hardware offerings by Japanese firms. Japan is, taking the big historical view. It's historically really strong when technology is an implementation phase rather than a radical breakthrough generation phase. So Chat GPT or GPT-4, it's a little difficult to imagine Japanese firms coming up with that. However, being implemented, good at implementing these kinds of things, there can be potential, because Japanese manufacturing prowess of things like lean production or just-in-time production, this was actually an effort to implement mass production Fordism style, but there wasn't enough physical space in the Toyota plants. So just-in-time and not holding much inventory became a practical solution that then drove a lot of process innovation from there. And we've been talking about the Silicon Valley ecosystem, which often leads people to think, okay, we're talking about Japanese partnerships, so are we talking about the Japanese startup ecosystem? Well, not yet. There's a separate thread about Japan's maturing startup ecosystem, and it's quite exciting, and it's a different driver of dynamism. However, it's not yet deeply tied to Silicon Valley yet. And so there are some recommendations. In bilateral discussions, let's make sure technology collaborations are framed properly. A lot of these are collaborative. They are layered. Amazon Web Services has invested billions in Japan in various data centers and other things, and Japanese startups can now use Amazon Web Services, Google Cloud, Oracle, etc., to rapidly scale up their services. And so their offerings without having to build their own data centers, and their tools are quite powerful and useful. And so it's not a zero-sum old school trade issue anymore. Let's include curated cases and representative input from the private sector or neutral parties into high-level bilateral dialogues. The usual talking points are pretty clear, but let's bring in specific examples of how these collaborations are happening, how the various kinds of innovative activity are happening, in order to get the high-level discussions framed in ways that are useful and constructive. And so that's it for my slides and my opening remarks. And so with that, I'd like to shift to our conversation with Ambassador Roos. So welcome. We're so delighted to be able to talk to you here.
Thanks, Kenji. First of all, great presentation. And let me just also thank you and Carnegie for the work you're doing in this area. In preparation for this session, I went back and looked at some of your prior webinars, and they're outstanding, and look forward to our conversation.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah. So first, we'd love to hear a bit more about your story, because you were at the frontier of Silicon Valley's ecosystem by leading the premier law firm Wilson Sonsini, right? Part of the Silicon Valley ecosystem components. Right? There's venture capital, there's the human capital mobility, there's government, industry, university ties, and then there's this big ecosystem of professional services. And often law firms do much more than just the legal work, right? You connect people and provide all of this. So you're the CEO of the core law firm of that. And I was reading your bio, or one of your interviews you gave. When you joined, there were about 50 people. And then when you were CEO, there were about 500 people. So you were at the forefront of this. And then you're at the forefront of U.S. Japan relationship as U.S. ambassador to Japan. And then now you're leading, bringing together the innovative parts of the two economies together with geodesic capital. And we both share a strong roots in Stanford. We were both went to school there and have deep ties there. And so I'm just so curious how your story unfolds.
Well, you just told my story, so I don't know if I need to tell it again. But so I grew up in this area, and as you said, went to Stanford. which at that time, during the 70s, was really part of, and has continued to be part of the core of Silicon Valley. And much of the great companies that emerged came out of that university, as well as UC Berkeley. And then after a short stint in Los Angeles, I came to the conclusion that the most exciting thing that was going on was in my own backyard in Silicon Valley. So I came back up here, joined Wilson Sonsini when it was a small firm, but we represented the core of Silicon Valley, Google, Apple, when they were just a couple kids in a garage. And we're the firm that grew up with Silicon Valley and all the different elements of the ecosystem we represented. And then, as you know, I had the incredible honor of being President Obama's first ambassador to Japan. And because of my background in the Valley, when I moved over there with my family, the questions I got all the time was, what's the secret sauce of the Silicon Valley? How can we get closer and integrate more with the Silicon Valley? What can we learn from Silicon Valley? And so when I wasn't dealing with earthquake, tsunami, and nuclear crises, I was really focused on the whole innovation, technological startup environment in Japan. And then when my term ended in 2013, I wanted to find a way to combine my prior career, prior to moving to Japan in Silicon Valley, with my experience in Japan. And that's when, among other things, I founded Geodesic Capital, which, you know, our mission is to help build a bridge between Silicon Valley and Japan.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. So in your own words, do you think you could describe Geodesic to us for a large number of our audience members that aren't deeply embedded in this Silicon Valley VC-centered world?
Well, as I said, so one of the elements that you laid out were venture capital firms that take investments from Japanese investors invested here in the Valley and then bring those technologies back to Japan. That's what we do. We have three elements, three pillars of our strategy. One is we invest in mid to later stage companies in the digital transformation area, basically software, that is critical to the Japanese market. Second, what we do is we help those companies go into the Japanese market through partnerships, through customers. We provide that connection. And then third, because almost all of our investors are major Japanese corporations, financial institutions, and even some government money, what we do is what we call provide a window to those companies into Silicon Valley. And we help them meet their strategic needs by, again, partnering with Silicon Valley companies.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so one of the things that was striking to me in my trips that I take to Washington after I joined Carnegie a little more than a year ago is that a lot of their views of big Japanese companies is not incorrect, but they're looking at the areas that are not the most exciting part because it's the government relations portion rather than the parts that are doing things at the front lines. And it's an important set of things connections to have, and the people from the Japanese companies in those DC offices are doing important work. That being said, I think we need to add conceptions of the more dynamic parts so that we're not underrepresenting some of the interesting things that are happening. So I'm curious, in your experience working with a lot of big Japanese companies, what are some of the things that surprised you about working with them in a good way?
Well, I mean, some of the things that I don't know that surprised me, but I learned more about it is, you know, Japan and major Japanese corporations constitute an incredible source of knowledge. The technology industry is very sophisticated there. It's they provide incredible customer relationships. And, we found very early on that major corporations can not only be an important source of capital, but can be an important source of partnerships, of innovation, of learning. And that was something I had hoped for, but was confirmed. One of the things that was on the other side of the ledger was Japanese corporations have a reputation, which I believe is true, of moving a little more deliberatively than Silicon Valley companies. So one of the challenges that we had was, how do you bridge that gap, so to speak? Because Silicon Valley companies move very quickly. And what I say often is, our challenge is to get Japanese corporations to move more quickly and Silicon Valley companies to be a little more patient and meet in the middle. And I think that is really happening. And the Silicon Valley companies have grown to really appreciate Japanese corporates, the major corporations, financial institutions, and vice versa. There's an incredible respect and on the other side of the ledger.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, and very diplomatically put as well, because of course we're not just saying, look, let's do some advertising for Japan. We're also saying, look, what can be done better, what can change, and of course often, I mean, I work with big Japanese companies and a lot of startups here too, and of course a common question is, so I just went to so many meetings, and then they asked for more meetings, and we don't seem to be getting anywhere. Are they just sort of moving something forward, or are they just sending us for a loop? And then, of course, it's important to figure out, are they consensus building? Once the consensus is built, then they can move really fast. So some experiences are, once the doesn't it take forever kind of thing happened, and they all decided to run in this direction, they went much faster than some of the Silicon Valley companies were expecting. And they were also a little more resilient to a few bumps in the road that the Silicon Valley startups would have otherwise said, oh, actually, we can't do this. Let's quickly switch direction. Well, hold on, be a little more patient, because once we solve this bump, then there's a big set of growth opportunities ahead.
Yes, but one thing I have learned is there's an incredible and growing appreciation for Japanese corporations, for the Japanese market. I mean, what's very interesting is, we share the same values. We protect intellectual property. With the tensions going on between the United States and China, there is a growing recognition that Japan is not only an important market, but an important partner for us to address many of the challenges that we have. And so that's been very interesting to see how that evolves. And I think we're only in the initial stages of that. We got to remember, Japan is an incredibly innovative country, incredibly wealthy country, and I'm talking about the private sector now, not only the government. There is complementary technologies. As we all know, Japan is very strong in machinery and some of those types of areas. U.S. is stronger in software, and you need the two to marry each other, and that is happening more and more. So there's a lot of great things that are going on between our two countries, and I see that only growing from here.
That's great. Yeah. And about a decade ago in Silicon Valley, everybody was, of course, looking just at China, is what it felt like. And then they weren't interested in Japan, saying, wow, the market is shrinking, economy is not growing, it's aging. But then that really has seemed to shift over the past decade, where people are interested in Japan.
Yeah, well, it's one of the top software markets in the world. And again, as I said, respects the intellectual property, and there's just incredible opportunities in that regard. And I really fundamentally believe that's why we have Geodesic focused on this, that the opportunities are growing there. A lot of times people say, well, it's an aging and declining population. But interestingly, that also creates an opportunity in the area of AI and automation. Japan needs some of these technologies in order to confront the declining population. And as a result, there are incredible opportunities for partnerships in those areas.
Yeah, and I've seen several big Japanese companies that are genuinely interested in not just the business opportunity, which of course is necessary, but also how to manage the declining population. You have more and more elderly people living alone. What are their communications needs? Sensors inside the house, because as a family member, I want to know if somebody falls, but I also want to know what happens before they fall. What should I be looking at? How slowly are the stairs being navigated, and what kind of slowdown is going to lead to a risk situation where I need to step in and say, okay, we're going to put extra railings, or we need to have somebody come and check, things like that. And so looking at the overall economic view, yes, the overall economy hasn't grown in a dynamic way, but if we look at these pockets, big pockets of potential demand for all sorts of things, and I think that leads to a point that it should be more part of the conversation of Washington, which tends to, and there are reasons for that, of course, look at things in the geopolitical sense and strategic sense. Let's decouple from China for various reasons, and let's make sure the supply chains are more China-proof. That also has to be linked to the commercial interest of what the companies can do in business terms, and then feed that into these bigger firms. So I'm curious if there are any specific examples of collaborations between big Japanese companies and, say, Silicon Valley companies that you'd like to highlight. Of course, there's lots that you can't talk about, but some of these.
You listed some on your slide, a few of which we at Geodesic have been involved with. But just to give you kind of a couple of examples that are easy to understand is take Uber's collaboration with Zhao. So Uber now has an application on the Zhao website, and that allows you to, when you land in Tokyo, to order an Uber. You have Airbnb, which we all know that has a collaboration with Sampo, the large insurance company, where Sampo insures the Airbnb rentals. Those are kind of simple examples to get your arms around. There's numerous others. I'm an advisor to Toyota Research Institute, and Toyota, as you know, it was on your slide, started Toyota Ventures, a corporate venture capital fund. That has grown from an initial focus on mobility to now numerous other areas, including, for example, the climate area, where they have a whole separate fund that's focused on that, investing in Silicon Valley companies. And those companies then integrate into the whole Toyota network and provide incredible technologies for their development. So that those partnerships that are started out small but are growing exponentially are just another example. And of course, there's numerous others.
Great, thank you. So as we're talking about numerous others, well, let's go to, it's a perfect segue into Fukunaga-san, who's part of one of the biggest corporate groups in Japan, NTT Data, and she's doing very exciting work here. And when we started talking in various ways, I think one of the findings was that the common perception of something like NTT Data is that it's very domestic focused and very kind of traditional. And now it's surprising how global they are and kind of the innovative things they're doing. And it might have even surprised people who work there. And so you've had some slides ready, so we'll have those ready. And I'd like to give the mic to you.
Okay, thank you for this valuable opportunity today. My name is Kaori Fukunaga from NTT Data. And as Kenji mentioned, I'm based in the Bay Area right now. My current role is to promote technology trend research, startup search, technology validation in partnerships with startups, with the business team in Japan, United States, and Europe, EMEA as well. So we're kind of, we are based in the Bay Area, but kind of global headquarter. And today I would like to give an overview of how NTT Data has expanded our global business and what I am working on in the Bay Area. Um, Before I begin my presentation, let me tell you one thing. Last week, I was talking to my brother about this presentation, and to my surprise, my brother was also a speaker here in 2015. Even though we have different topics and expertise, but we are honored to be in the same places as siblings. So I would like to start the presentation. So NTT Data, could you next page, please? Yeah, NTT Data is one of subsidiary companies of NTT Group, as Kenji mentioned. So NTT stands for Nippon Telegraph and Telephone, and it is a company like AT&T in the United States. So when I joined NTT Data in the year of 2000, it was still very much a Japanese company, but now it has become a global company through acquisitions and business expansion. So sales are 26 billion US dollars, and the number of employees is about 190K plus. We have offices in more than 55 countries and regions. There are 23 countries with a domestic market share of more than 2%. We are also in top 6 in most valuable IT services brand survey and are aiming to become in top 5 right now. Next page, please. And this slide shows our journey to business growth globally. So we have set our group vision of becoming a trusted global innovator and have been moving through 3 stages in our quest to become a global top 5 company that is trusted by clients around the world. In the global first stage, which began in fiscal year 2005, we expanded our global coverage. So at that time, we merged and acquired a lot of regional companies worldwide, not only in Japan, but also US, Europe, APAC area. So in the global second stage, which began in fiscal year 2016, we have been working to establish a global brand. The names of the acquired companies have been unified under the NTT Data brand, such as NTT Data UK, NTT Data Spain, NTT Data Italy, and NTT Data Services in the US as well. So in the midterm business plan starting from 2022, we will work for 4 years until fiscal year 2025 to become a company that is trusted by clients around the world. The goal of the midterm management plan is realizing a sustainable future. We aim to realize a sustainable society together with our clients by creating value for the future and connecting various people with technology. Next page, please. Okay, and this graph shows the history of our business since our establishment in 1988. So we have several stages. First, for the first 10 years after our establishment, we grew our business mainly in the public sector and the financial sector in Japanese market. Then, around the year of 2000, we began to focus on the enterprise business, the largest market in Japan, acquired IT subsidiary companies in the manufacturing industry and other sectors, and accumulated know-how in each industry and expanded our corporate business. Around 2005, we turned our attention overseas. One of the reasons for this was trend of domestic clients expanding their business overseas. We received many requests to support our clients for their overseas expansion in terms of IT systems. In addition, the global IT market was growing significantly at that time, and since around 2005, we have been expanding our overseas business through M&A. And now digital transformation has been progressing rapidly worldwide. In order to keep up with this trend, we have been working to strengthen our digital capabilities and improve our value. And we have also improved the profitability of our global business. Because later I will like to touch on the market presence worldwide. We are still strong in Japan market, but we would like to expand the presence worldwide. Yes, and in this way, we have overcome various environmental changes since our establishment and have achieved 33 consecutive terms of revenue growth. To go forward, NTT Data will take on the challenge of new reforms to further increase sales and raise the ratio of overseas sales, and which is indicated in the dark blue area of the bar graph. Next slide, please. Okay, this graph shows the history of major foreign acquisitions. The most significant acquisition we have experienced in the United States was the acquisition of Dell Services in 2016. So I think it was the biggest one. And more recently, we have acquired local companies with digital capabilities. To promote the digital business, mainly in North America, we optimize business portfolio through selection and concentration. Okay, next slide, please. Next, I would like to introduce our presence in each country. When our market share of sales reaches 2% or more, it means that we have a large share of the market in that country. Then we can receive requests for proposals from government and enterprises in each country. This creates a virtuous cycle in which a high market share brings new opportunities. We originally boasted a high market share in Spain, Italy, Turkey, and Chile, in addition to Japan, so 5 countries. In the Japanese market, the market share is more than 10.7%. So thanks to the integration of our overseas business with NTT Limited in October of last year, we could increase the number of countries with a market share of 2% or more from 5 countries to 23 countries. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, all right. This slide shows the overall strategy of our midterm management plan to realize our vision of realizing a sustainable future. And I will not touch on all the parts, but I highlighted the red part, strategy 4. So this strategy 4 is a very related to my mission in the Bay Area. So we would like to enhance advanced technologies and development technologies by collaborating with great startups here. Okay, next page, please. And this slide shows our business areas. In vertical, we not only contribute to the business of our clients in each industry, but also help build the infrastructure that supports society, such as smart city, embedded finance, connected car, and so on. And horizontally, we promote digital transformation for our clients in each industry by leveraging technology from edge to cloud. As I mentioned, we combined NTT Data and NTT Limited last year. And originally, NTT Data had a capability of system integration on consulting and application services side. And NTT Limited had a strength in edge to cloud operation services. So thanks to that combination, we could cover much more technology area. Yes. Okay. So next slide, please. All right. To support strategy 1 through 5, we strengthen the functions of marketing, innovation, and governance on a global basis to respond quickly to changes in the business environment and to achieve business growth toward the global third stage. We also establish a virtuous cycle of investment and growth to achieve business growth toward the global third stage. Specifically, as shown on the left side of the slide, in addition to the 5 focus areas of industry and technology, we have established a new investment framework for themes that will bring about social change. We will promote strategic investments across the globe for the creation of future businesses. Through these investments, we will strive to achieve the goals of our midterm management plan and achieve sustainable growth. Okay, next page, please. From this page, I would like to talk about the next generation partners and incubation organization I belong here. So before I mention about NPI, I would like to talk about the history of Silicon Valley office of NTT Data. So NTT Data had been based in Silicon Valley since 1995. For a long time, the purpose was to exist as a center for advanced technology as R&D. Then after about 20 years of serving as a center for technology trends, we changed our mission to serve as a center for innovation last year. So NPI was established last year. And as I mentioned, NPI stands for Next Generation Partners and Incubation, a team under NTT Data's Global Innovation Headquarters. In addition to the NPI, there are teams in each country that promote startup search, technology validation, and partnerships. And the NPI serves as their information hub. So NPI team includes experienced people from diverse backgrounds, skilled in alliances, investments, incubation, consulting, R&D, internal IT, and global business management. Right. Okay, next please. This represents the organizational chart of GIH. GIH was also established last year in July to drive global business growth through innovative asset-based proposals and technology investments. We are strengthening our global collaboration to provide business solutions that leverage technology to contribute to a sustainable society. So we at NPI are part of Global Innovation and Innovation Growth team. Okay, next page, please. All right, so now this slide shows a technical area that my Bay Area team is targeting. On the left side, it shows the emerging technology. We are watching these themes as emerging technologies such as CX design, digital twin, metaverse, blockchain, digital human, quantum computing, and so on. And on the right side, we are also searching for technology companies that will become the next de facto standard in the core technology that every industry needs. We've already collaborated with this right part companies a lot, but we are still looking for potential future de facto standard startups. And yes, okay, next page, please. Okay, we have defined an innovation funnel. As described, we define a problem statement based on customer insights, business strategy, technology trends, and then look for technologies and technology companies to solve the problem. Then we conduct technology validation, business validation, customer POC, and asset creation to expand the business globally. Right, and this is the last, next page, please. This is the last page. So this shows our progress to date. I would like to introduce some of the results of NPI's activities in FY 2022 are presented below. In the current fiscal year, NPI conducted 1,500 startup scouts, screened of 437 companies, met with 59 companies together with the business department worldwide, not only Japan, conducted technology validation of 22 companies and partnered with 9 companies. Based in Silicon Valley, I believe quickly identifying startups with business potential and connecting them to our business division is essential to the expansion of our global business. We believe the establishment of the NPI team is essential for our company. Thank you for kind attention. Thank you. Yeah, that's it.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. So yeah, it's very representative of the type of what we would be rather unexpectedly global Japanese company that used to be very domestic. Your growth has been rather incredible. Looking at the from 05 to 15, 1.6 trillion yen to this past year up to 2.5 trillion. I mean, that's a lot of growth that we see in there. And I'm curious for that funnel that you showed at the end, and that's part of the strength of being in Silicon Valley. You can see you meet so many companies, you funnel it down, you do proof of concept test, and they're not all just from Silicon Valley, right? It's Israeli companies and others, but it's your Silicon Valley team that's doing that because that's your function. Is what I'm saying. Other specific exciting cases of partnerships and collaborations that you'd be able to share with us?
Okay, so could you show the last two slides, please? Okay, so I would like to talk about two use cases. One is about Snowflake ecosystem. We have had a relationship with Snowflake since our business trip around 2019. So we came here as a business trip and we found Snowflake at that time. And we thought that this company is very good and going to be the de facto standard in data and intelligence area. So we moved quickly, and after we quickly decided the capital and business partnership with Snowflake in 2020. And NTT Data has seen solid growth in its digital success business with Snowflake. And of course, we're also looking for Snowflake ecosystem startups here. And many of them are growing in the Bay Area, and we are seeking partnership with leading startups in D&I technology area. We are conducting tech assessments with several companies these days. Although I cannot give details, but yeah, I'm collaborating with many startups here. And I also have one more use case. The next page. Yeah, this is a use case with an auto security startup. The security team at NTT Data is focused on developing auto security assets. The auto security asset has 5 phases, from architectural analysis and code review to penetration testing. And we are leveraging C2A security in the area of fuzzy testing. C2A Security is an Israeli company, but as a result of the search and technical validation between our team and a global team of cybersecurity experts, we received a high evaluation from Marelli, that is an Italian component company, automobile part company. And here's a news release from event. In this way, we hope to deliver value to our customers by incorporating technology from not only Silicon Valley startups, but also startups from around the world into our business in a good way. Yeah, thank you.
Hey, Kenji, do we have time for me to make a quick comment on?
Absolutely, yeah.
A very interesting point that she raised was the acquisition strategy of NTT Data. And I think that with all the customer relationships, partnerships, and other collaborations we've talked about, I think the opportunity for acquisitions, though they are difficult to do, is going to be increasing exponentially. So I think this whole M&A strategy is something that could be very exciting for many companies.
Yeah, and so acquiring companies and then how to manage them afterwards. And in good ways, it can affect the companies that do the acquiring, where they learn from the acquisition and different levels of independence. I'm sure there's going to be a large spectrum of various types of activities, experiments that will happen. And I'm looking forward to learning from a lot of that in another iteration. And so we are right up against the hour. I'm told that my slide somehow didn't work, so maybe we should have had an NTT Data and partner provided solution instead of what we're using now for our streaming. But our conversation could go on for the rest of the afternoon, but we're going to cut it here because I think it's often good to as opposed to dragging something out where you've already heard enough, but you still have to go, rather than that saying, I really want to learn more and more. And that's where you have the opportunity to reach out to all of us. We'll be around for the programming. And as things develop, we hope to have you on another webinar. Thank you so much for joining us out of your busy schedules. Thank you to all the viewers, live and later. And we're very much, I think, all in agreement that the U.S. Japan collaboration in technology and innovation, we're at an exciting phase. There has been a lot, but we're just getting started. And so we have a lot to look forward to. And so again, thank you very much. And we hope to see you again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.